Writing is my favorite thing to do.
Have you heard about the Gateway to Publishing Conference and Convention? They'll have writing workshops, writing classes, and more. June 16th through 18th, 2017 at the Renaissance Airport Hotel in St. Louis, Missouri.
Cool! Where can I sign up?
Go right now to www.stlwritersguild.org and click on GatewayCon.
www.stlwritersguild.org and click on GatewayCon?
That's right. See you there.
Right Pack Radio, a podcast produced by Winding Trails Media for writers by writers.
Writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Right Pack.
Welcome back to Right Pack Radio. This is your host and producer, David Allen Lucas, president of Winding Trails Media and president of St. Louis Writers Guild. And if you probably already heard the advertisement, but I'm going to say it again. Coming up June 16th through 18th in St. Louis, we are going to have the Gateway to Publishing Writers Conference and Readers Convention. Check it out. Go to www.stlwritersguild.org and you'll find a big blue button called GatewayCon. Click on it and learn more. Please come because it is going to be highly unique and highly exciting. And with me today, back from the dead, is my lovely co-host, not looking so lovely anymore because she's been zombified. No, I'm just joking. She's
because
she's
been raised from the dead.
It's not making any statement about your appearance. It's that you're a zombie because you were dead.
Yeah.
Everyone, rumors of my demise were greatly exaggerated.
We tried to exaggerate.
My name is Kathleen Kayembe. I have a short story called You Will Always Have Family up at nightmaremagazine.com right now. And I write romance under the pen name Kaseka and Vita.
And also with us today is...
My name is Jennifer Stolzer. I'm a children's book author and illustrator. My premiere novel is available on Amazon. It's called Threadcaster. Please check it out in paperback and ebook. If you'd like a signed copy, you can order them through Main Street Books in St. Charles. It's in Missouri. And if you would like an official Threadcaster string that I have on my wrist at this moment, you can go to www.threadcaster.com. I'm selling them for, let's say, $5. If it's not $5 when you get there, I apologize.
Yeah, you could also actually go to Main Street Books and buy a copy.
Yes, you can if you live in St. Louis. But I got to take into account that people might not live in St. Louis, and they have signed copies there. So if you want a signed copy, order it from them so they can ship it to you.
You really should take in because it turns out we have listeners around the world. So quick shouts out to some of those countries like Sweden, Denmark, Germany, Great Britain, New Zealand, Australia, Turkey, Egypt, Japan, and ones which I have not mentioned. Because I wasn't going to be here forever.
We need to get someone in Antarctica.
Careful. You know what? Considering those scientists are usually isolated, we could send them books and might turn into it.
Let's do it.
Anyway, that would be more of a steampunk idea. So why it wouldn't be steampunk?
How's that steampunk? That's like snow and stuff.
No, it would only be steampunk.
However, I could get you there.
I was thinking airship
it would only be steampunk if we took him by steamship.
Yeah.
And speaking of steam
airship
would be
in.
And you'd probably freeze and crash.
Yeah, it's awful.
Anyway, I am Brad R. Cook. I am the author of steampunk novels, perhaps, as well as other stuff. But you can find the Iron Chronicles, Iron Horseman, Iron Zulu, and Iron Lotus at your bookstores online, all over the place. Find them for your ebooks as well. Find out about everything I write at bradarcook.com.
My name is Chanel Etienne, and sometimes I write things.
She's as bad as I am.
You're feeling a little down today, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm a little less than stellar. But
I know the feeling.
Yeah, sci-fi and fantasy are usually the things that I write.
And also?
I'm Melanie Lucas. I said last week by the time last week's show aired, I'd be writing again. I suppose that might still be true. We'll see.
By next week's show, you might be writing it.
Yeah,
I
we'll
like
see.
it.
Well, the good news is we do have. We're going out of town for my birthday, so hopefully
Writing.
there'll be some writing in there.
Oh yeah, you're right. Because last week's show will air in May, so we're
This will air May 7th.
You're blowing the minds of our audience right now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Don't worry, audience. It's the present for you.
Yes. So we're
Time
speaking
travel.
from the past, and yes, and I have or. Speaking to the future, I'm writing on my fantasy novel, and I've gotten it replotted. Really.
Awesome. Yes.
Excellent.
Congratulations.
And also with us today is our favorite Madame Murder.
Fedora Amos. I write Victorian Whodunits like Jack the Ripper in St. Louis and Mayhem at Buffalo Bill's Wild West. I'm president of Greater St. Louis Sisters in Crime, and I want to send out a shout out to my critique partner Claire Applewhite, who is a St. Louis Woman of Achievement.
Yes.
And is going to be honored on the 16th of May as that. So, congratulations, Claire. Well deserved.
Yeah,
Hooray!
very much
Congrats,
so.
Claire.
And also with us today is
My name is George Soroy. I'm the Vice President of the Missouri Writers Guild. A special thanks to everyone showing up at the Holiday and Executive Center in Columbia, Missouri for the 2017 Missouri Writers Guild Conference. It's a great pleasure to see you as this is going on. I am actually finishing up my masterclass, so I really hope that I'm seeing a lot of you guys there, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you guys in the future. I am also an author of science fiction for the young adult reader. Both of my young adult novels, Excelsior and Ever Upward Part 2 in the Excelsior Journey, are coming out from Aloris Publishing in June and July of this year, and my finished 5-part serial, From Parts Unknown, will also be released at a later date this year as well.
You know, and one thing, listening to everybody here with us, and since we always record in the past, we record ahead, I'm thinking we need to do a topic eventually. This is not today's topic, people, just to let you know. But a topic on time travel and dealing with the problems in fiction.
Oh, jeez.
And by the
So
way,
I can rant about that?
oh, I
'Cause
know,
I have a whole thing.
I can't do.
Now today's topic
No.
has changed.
I see what you're
And okay, then we need to talk about H.G. Wells. No, I'm just joking. Also, too, along with that, we do take audience or fan suggestions for topics. So if you have one, send to producer@windingtrailsmedia.com. Again, that is producer@windingtrailsmedia.com. Do me a favor, since I received lots of junk mail. Put in the subject line of the email, WPR topic idea. That's WPR as in Right Pack Radio, topic idea. And cool, thank you. So what is today's topic? Today we're going to talk about the author, Daphne du Maurier. Wow, I actually did pronounce it correctly, yay! And also a subject in which many writers, even when not guilty of this, get accused of it. Accusations of plagiarism.
Dun, dun, dun.
Daphne got accused of it. Also, the guy who wrote Roots, whose name just went out of my
Alex
mind.
Haley.
Thank you, and I wrote his writing. It
You're working
happens.
too hard to pronounce her name correctly.
Yeah, I did. I really did. It's that. Anyway.
It's the French pronunciation.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's talk about Daphne first, and then let's talk about our list. I got Fedora. She's jumping.
I want to
into
go
bed.
back even farther than Daphne
Ooh.
because she has a wonderful pedigree. Her grandfather was George du Maurier, who also wrote thrillers, and they were formed into plays and the like. His main opus is Trilby, and you might think that you've never heard of it, but in a way you have, because the main character, Trilby, is a woman who is transformed by Svengali into a diva at the opera. Make anybody sit up and take notice? which was 20 years after he wrote it, then transformed, shall we say, into The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston
LaRue.
Uh-huh.
Good job.
and of course has come down to us ever since then. So I think that she has a really great pedigree for writing thrillers, and her character, if it's a lot like anybody, is a whole. Her main character, the second Mrs. De Winter, is a whole lot like Trilby, really, kind of mesmerized by this wonderful and amazing person, Maximilian.
Yeah, I think I read Rebecca. It was years ago, so I don't remember it too well. But I think so.
If you want to read it again, it is in our private library downstairs.
Okay.
I do want to say that at least 3 of her books, or 3 of her stories, that's not true, because one was a short story I know of, but 3 of her stories got turned into Alfred Hitchcock suspense thrillers. So, what else do we know about
And of course, it was a very famous movie and has sold millions of copies and has never been out of print since she wrote it in the late 30s. I don't know exactly when. 36 or 70.
Something like that.
And the movie was in the 40s with Joan Fontaine.
Oh, I'm sorry, 38. Jamaica Inn was 36. That was another one.
Okay, that was another famous one. And of course, her characters are famous. One that isn't like any that her granddad wrote was Mrs. Danvers, and that is a really psychologically witchy person. And I think that the notion of psychological manifestations and manipulations is the key element of the success of it, because a lot of people feel that they've been manipulated one way or another.
No, sir. Go ahead.
I was just thinking one of the very interesting things about Rebecca, especially when you read the book, the main character, you never know what her name is. She is never named. In the movie, she's called Mrs. Danvers. But she's never named in the book. You never know what her first
No,
name
Mrs.
is.
Danvers is the evil
Sorry,
housekeeper.
never mind. Sorry.
The second Mrs. De Winter is
sorry.
the one you're talking
But
about.
the second
there.
Mrs. De Winters, she's never even called Miss. Well, I don't remember. She might have been called Mrs. De Winters once in the book, but you know she's Mrs. De Winters because she's married to Mr. De Winters. You never know what her name is, and she's the point of view character.
I have to admit, I don't remember because
Except
it's so long
that
ago.
Rebecca is the one that overshadows everything, and she's dead.
She dies before the story starts.
Absolutely.
She's the first wife. Her ghost. Well, her not literal ghost.
Yes.
So it's an exploration, I think, of our own fears and our own beliefs that we're not good enough, and that really make it spectacular. And you don't find those things in these other people's works. So I don't think that she was much of a plagiarist, and certainly she never got convicted of any kind of copyright infringement, and was popular from then on. And one of many, I might add, that fall in that same category.
Yeah, she was mostly just accused of plagiarism,
Right.
and I'm just going through some notes, and I don't see that she was actually convicted, as you said.
Or even
There
sued.
was never
she was
even a
sued.
trial.
Yeah, she was sued, I believe, over it. I'm going to double check that, because I could be wrong.
But she also had a lot of really powerful people behind her. So.
Yes. Well, I mean, Alfred Hitchcock, for one, is not... I don't know if
But
I ever want to screw around with that man.
I have a different topic, so if you're coming.
Go ahead.
I did want to get into something that was said before the episode. There were social reasons why the plagiarism accusations may have happened as well. The desire to discredit Du Maurier because of her own Brad.
Well, she
You described it better. I didn't want to do it. I was hoping you would jump in.
So she was married to Frederick Browning. She had 3 children, Tessa, Flava, and Christian. However, I don't know. It's hard to say because she had multiple facades that she would put forward. And the one she put forward the most was a very cold, aloof kind of person. After her death in 1989, it was reputed that she was a bisexual, And apparently, in some of her own claims, is that her father had always wanted a son, and she had always felt like a boy. So I don't know how much of this would come out, and how much of this... I mean, I guess the point is we don't really know if she's guilty of the plagiarism. There is some anecdotal evidence that it might have been a Brazilian novelist who first penned it and then sent it to the publisher, who would then eventually publish Rebecca.
Yeah, and
So-
didn't DeMoye work for that publisher?
Yeah.
As an editor or / PAL reader or something along those lines.
So there's a lot of connections to the book, Rebecca, that, possibly. But that's also to say, like, there are a lot of novels that share similar themes, concepts, even, similar characters. I don't necessarily think that means that one plagiarized off the other. So I wouldn't necessarily want to say that she plagiarized or not. I don't know her enough to actually say that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know the social aspects around it, but given everything, one would have to wonder.
From what I've read on Wiki and some of the things that Fedora said, Wiki basically said that she wrote popular fiction, but in a way that had a lot of literary elements. So the endings often resonated with readers long after the book was put down. Things didn't quite feel resolved. And so as far as the plagiarism thing goes, Chanel and I have talked before about people having the same idea around the country tending to happen at the same time, because it happens a lot. Somebody will invent something, and across the world somebody else was just inventing the same thing. And I think some ideas are like that. But it sounds like with du Maurier, even though she had ideas that are similar to those that other people use, she wrote them in such a way that her works are classics today. And they're still read and resonate with readers very strongly.
One of the most interesting things I found out about it is simply that she was disappointed in Rebecca. Not because of how well it did, but because people seemed to miss the message of women's empowerment and women, standing up for themselves, which is what she was really trying to say. So I thought that was very interesting. No matter how good you are, you don't necessarily get that theme knocked in.
I was just thinking what you were just saying kind of led it into the slightly different direction I wanted to take it, that especially in creative writing, both creative nonfiction and creative fiction, there's a whole lot of it's not plagiarism, but rewriting the same story.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think in that point it's a shame, because I think it would be important to acknowledge your influences. On the other hand, that's a good way to get sued for plagiarism, when it's really, Shakespeare borrowed all the time. And if you rewrite it, if you change the emphasis, if you don't use someone else's words, but just use their ideas and then change them, that's not plagiarism.
I'm going to turn this over to Fedora real fast. I said this a moment ago, and I think I discovered I was wrong. That with Rebecca, I had said that she had worked for the publisher in some capacity. That is incorrect, or if it is correct, it's not what I was thinking of. It was with her short story, The Birds, which got turned into Alfred Hitchcock's movie, The Birds. Frank Baker had accused her of plagiarizing his novel, The Birds, which, when he had submitted to the publisher, du Maurier was working as a reader for that publisher. So that's where the accusation on that one came from. It's mixed up my accusations. Go ahead.
I think it's time for us to make some clear definitions of what exactly we're talking about. The definitions I think we need are derivatives, plagiarism, copyright infringement, and make all of those three real clear. And then I'll talk a little bit about history. So who would like to define those in some way that makes sense to all of us here?
Well, in case of plagiarism, plagiarism is literally taking someone else's work, usually verbatim, and claiming it to be yours.
But even if not verbatim,
chunks of it verbatim.
Even if not verbatim.
Even if not verbatim, yes. Because I have had work plagiarized before in a completely Spanish setting, and even though it was not verbatim, it was very clearly, practically word for word what I had written.
Right.
They changed some words trying to make it look different.
Yeah, changed just
but
enough
it's still
that,
plagiarism.
just enough that maybe they can get away with it, but it's still.
I'm going to turn over to George here just a second, but I was going to say a perfect example, modern day example. And I know if you've listened to previous episodes, we've had these books on there as our whipping childs, if you will. But I'm not using it as such. I'm going to talk about Twilight, and then how 50 Shades of Grey was accused of plagiarizing.
It wasn't accused.
It's
She
not-
outright
She
said
outright
she
said
did in a public setting.
Now you're getting copyright infringement.
That's
No, this is
different.
true.
That's not plagiarism. It's,
Yeah, that's copyright infringement.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Now you've jumped into somebody else's world.
I
and
thought it
you're
was
playing in
plagiarism.
someone else's world. That's copyright infringement.
All right, I have a couple definitions.
Good.
So
We need
copy.
them.
Please do. I was about to run down and get my legal dictionary.
Copyright infringement is the use of works protected by copyright law without permission, infringing certain exclusive rights granted to the copyright holder, such as the right to reproduce, distribute, display, or perform the protected work, or to make derivative works. And Fedora mentioned derivative works, which 50 Shades of Grey sounds like it was. So, hold on.
Well, yeah.
Technically, it started as copyright infringement because it was fanfic, and then it would move into derivative when it gets changed to become a novel.
Yes, which is excellent segue to a derivative work. A derivative work is a work based on or derived from one or more already existing works. Common derivative works include translations, music arrangements, motion picture versions of literary material or plays, art reproductions, abridgments, and condensations of pre-existing works. Or, in the case of Twilight and 50 Shades of Grey, Twilight was the original work, and the derivative work, which was copyright infringement, the fanfic, was then edited to be an original work. But it was still very much derivative of Twilight, to the point where they were able to sue.
Well, it was different enough that they got away with it. E.L. James got away with it until she went on public television and admitted that it started as a Twilight fanfic, and then Stephanie Meyer's estate came after her.
Thank you, that is correct.
I will
That's
say,
when the lawyers twisted their mustaches.
It's like
Yes,
she should have
we make
just
money.
left well enough alone, because it can exist without the Twilight knowledge, but once you know that it's related to Twilight, it's suddenly very
You
obvious.
can't unsee it. Oh, I have one more definition.
Okay. Then George.
The original definition, plagiarism. It is the practice of taking someone else's work or ideas and passing them off as one's own. Synonyms: piracy, theft.
Yep.
As you were.
Kind of relates to something that happened to me back in, I want to say 2008, 2009 or so, when I had put together just a YouTube video, just a basic YouTube video using clips from other pieces of work and everything. Never claimed that that I had shot all these things, but at the same time, it was a video that I enjoyed editing together. And somebody basically kind of took that video, lopped off the first few seconds where I had my name on it, stuck their own stupid looking brand on the bottom right, and passed it off as their own. And I basically just kind of informed my my readers from 411mania.com. So it's like, hey, this person did that. Let them know, your anger. Because I had already let out mine, and it was still up there. So yeah, this person wound up getting hit with a whole lot of complaints and reports and everything, and it eventually got taken down. But one particular story of plagiarism that I remember that happened. It's actually happened about 30 years ago this year. It would be basically this this producer agent in Hollywood, Art Buchwald. He had an idea for this story called King for a Day. And he passed it. He wound up going through the usual channels and everything. It found its way to Eddie Murphy, who took it and turned it into Coming to America. And there was enough material in Art Buchwald's original story that he was able to go forward and sue Eddie Murphy Productions for plagiarism. They wound up settling out of court. And but at the same time, that was one of the more high-profile cases of plagiarism in modern Hollywood.
And I'm going to say too, with that, I've talked about this before. While I am a fan of fanfic, this is a problem you run into when you do fanfic. And a recent settlement that just occurred. Axonar, actually, sorry, it's CBS and Paramount. Actually, it's Paramount and CBS versus Axonar Productions, which was doing a fanfic and is doing a fanfic now on Star Trek. And
That's still going, right? That case is still...
No, the case is settled, last I heard. However, it took the original movie idea of doing Axonar to being a 2-episode, 15 minutes, I believe, each, instead of a full-on 2-hour movie, last I heard. And I might not have exact facts right on that, but I do know it got settled finally. But yeah, it was not pretty. Go ahead.
That reminds me of something. I think author Sharon Shin was the one who said this. But so when Jennifer and I were ickle children,
So ickle.
Sharon Shin, a local author of wonderful books, the Archangel series, which the first book all of us read. She came to our mutual friend's birthday party because all of us were writers and my friend loved her book. So she gave us all the first book, and we all got to ask an author questions, and it was great. But one of the things I believe she's the one that said to me was that as a published author of this series, she cannot read your fan fiction if you send it to her. She cannot officially. The official state of fan fiction for the original author of the work is it's great that fan fiction exists. I can't read it. I can't look at it because they can be sued if you send them, their work, and then it's something that like eventually part of it may appear in their work because it was a natural progression and part of their plan, but because you sent it to them and they've quote unquote read it, they can then be sued for that.
I think so.
Okay, don't tell them then.
I heard a lawyer say this.
Sorry,
Let's-
Sue.
Did you say
I'll
Gesundheit
forward
after?
Yeah, but basically, one of the defenses for plagiarism is if you really can prove there's no way you could have had access to the original work. So if 100 monkeys in a room wrote Harry Potter, then those 100 monkeys could actually have Harry Potter and not have plagiarized it because they never read Harry Potter.
Yeah.
So that's theoretically possible. Yes, infinitely improbable.
It's
but,
probably as easy to convince a court that you are 100 monkeys in a room as it is to say you haven't had exposure to a piece of work unless it's really obscure.
Exactly. So that's the point. It's
Can I get like 10 of these monkeys?
If you can just prove that you are
This
Congress,
was the
anyway.
first 10th of Harry Potter.
Who compiles their work
So it-
though?
Couldn't
That
resist.
compiler might have read Harry Potter.
Yeah.
I do want to get to something, but I'm going to let Fedora go next, and then
Well-
let's talk about something.
I want to try to bring some sensibility, I suppose, to how we got to this mess in the first place. Because as you can see, it's all fairly nebulous and hard to pin down. And it's because, in large part, because it's relatively new. The earliest patent and copyright laws did not happen until the 1400s in Venice. And then eventually it went other places. I mean, Shakespeare could not be accused of anything at all, and he often said how much he owed to various other earlier authors, and took Romeo and Juliet almost out of whole cloth. But it was not a problem because there was not any English law against it until the 1700s, and certainly not here. It was one of the earliest things in our Constitution in 1790 that we started having some, but still nobody then or really since knows exactly what they are and why it is still so nebulous, because it is a relatively new idea that intellectual property should be protected, that it deserves protection, and it came along really with war machines more than anything else, and we're just kind of a sidelight of all of that.
And a part of that, too, the intellectual property laws are ever evolving. And on top of that, copyright itself has evolved over the last, it was 40 years, probably less than that, but I'm just going to throw it out there as to how long laws can be protected. Go ahead, and then you.
Isn't the lack of copyright and protection for intellectual property part of why authors like Poe died penniless, even though their works were well known and selling well? I'm using Poe as an example, but
Yeah.
I've heard of others.
Depends upon your author. Like some people they're penniless because they never really made much off their books due to the contracts or whatever, stuff like that. Some people spent what they had; they didn't make much anyway. You didn't make a ton as an author back in the day, unless you were super huge. Yeah. So there are a ton of reasons like that, but you are right. Most of the time, you sold your rights.
All of them, yes.
Yeah. To the publisher, who would then make a ton of money off you.
Or, take for example the case of Charles Dickens, who came on a rampage to this country just before the Civil War because all of his books were quite legally, by the way, reprinted by American companies, and he got not a penny for it. We didn't sign any international copyright treaty until 1892.
And still, international copyright laws are
Still ugly.
Everything is stolen and reprinted in Russia constantly.
Yeah, and China.
Absolutely.
In China
Hey,
as well.
you can read. I don't suggest it because I fully believe that there have to be viruses on some of this stuff, but you can read all of my novels. They've all been pirated, and they're all pirated. Some even before my book comes out.
Wow.
Which is a good one.
That's really annoying.
No, but that's impressive. You're not annoying. That's just impressive.
Well, what's really impressive about it is I'm a nobody author.
Yeah.
And my stuff is still pirated. Heck, I found an ad on YouTube for a pirated copy of my book.
Now I want to see if my work's been pirated. This is fascinating, and it's probably going to hurt if it is, but still.
Just Google it, and if there's a PDF, it's probably coming from either Canada or Russia or something like that, and they can read it that way.
I don't know whether to be proud or outraged right now.
I'm going to come to you next, but I'm going to say this happened a couple years ago. Was somebody in Africa supposedly selling books in Africa was pirating a lot.
It's all over. There's a guy in Canada who refuses to take down anything.
Right.
He'll send you a nasty you'll send him a nasty note telling him to pull it down. He'll send you a nasty note telling you he's not. But I will say this. I firmly believe in the Paulo Coelho attitude towards piracy. That if somebody out there reads my book and they got it for free, there's a really good chance that they're going to tell somebody they read my book. And somebody along this chain is probably going to buy it because they don't pirate it, they just get it from their library, they get it from somewhere. But people are reading and talking about you, and if that's the case, that might actually work. He thinks he sells more books because he's pirated than if he wasn't pirated.
I've, just to feed directly into that real fast, I've heard an argument saying that piracy is bad because it takes dollars away from you.
Yes.
But most of the people who pirate it weren't going to buy it anyway.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So you decide to pick your battles based on that.
But some of us then go get the original and pay for it when it's finally released.
Yes.
I've been collecting all of those anime that I watched in people's burned CDs in high school as they come out on DVD.
Yeah. Did you guys want to stay on topic, or because I had a different direction to go in?
I just a little tag regarding that.
Okay.
The way I see it is just like I kind of subscribe to the same attitude that Brad does. It's just like if you really want to want to read like something of mine that's currently not around right now because it's it's all getting redone and getting ready for relaunch. But in the case of what when they were online, if you really want to go to this random site that has like 37 consonants in a row without a single vowel, and you think you can get a perfectly clean PDF from there, have at it. I take no responsibility on what happens to your computer as a result of that.
Exactly. Read at your own risk.
Okay, compounding the nebulous nature of this whole thing is the current law, at least in the United States, contains a list of material that cannot be protected by copyright at all. This includes government work, any of it. If you write for the government, it don't belong to you no more. Titles cannot be, names and slogans cannot be.
But they can be trademarked.
Yes,
That's
and you can get trademark infringement, maybe, but not.
Yeah.
This. It depends. It depends on a lot of things, and ideas, which surprises a lot of people who want to sue. But take, for example, the case of Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park, which was locally quite a big deal because he was actually here for this trial. And there was a fellow named Jeffrey Williams who wrote Dinosaur World Series for Children, and he sued Michael Crichton. But the courts noted that the less developed the characters, the less they can be copyrighted. So what this says to me, this whole thing is, make sure your characters are really special and unique.
Was the court just like surreptitiously slamming that author's writing? That's what
Probably.
it sounds like.
Sounds like
In
it.
part, we didn't like yours as much as his. So
Here's
we
my
went.
thing about derision and stuff, and this ties into what you just said. Like, George Lucas and I created the exact same terms for planets at the exact same time, episode 1. So, and I was writing a space little thing at the time, and we both created Utapau.
Oh, how random.
How random is that? I thought I created this really cool world called Utapau, and then I went and saw episode 1, and I said, crap, George Lucas just stole my idea. But George and I didn't talk.
Yeah.
George didn't pick my brain. I didn't go out and get to go to Skywalker Ranch, damn it. You know, in the end, we both literally created this stupid word that we both probably pulled out of, you know, some ancient text or world or some sort of thing. That's where I tend to get most of my...
And that's where he did too, as well.
Yeah, exactly. So we both probably went to the same source, twisted it in the same way, and came up with the same world. So I really think that derision is just a thing. You know, it's like why we all started planting crops at the same time.
There's nothing new under the sun.
Right. And just 2 examples, and I'm turning this over to Kathleen, of George Lucas doing that. The term Jedi and Yavin are both ancient Hebrew. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yavin. Anyway.
I
Stormpilot.
just derailed
Anyway.
her. Okay.
Yeah. So that's a good segue into what I wanted to talk about, actually. We have mentioned that people do get ideas across the world, and in the example of Brad and George Lucas, same word. Complete lack of communication between them. So that does happen. But
No, George Lucas was following Brad on Twitter. He really was.
Right. Okay. Moving on.
definitely what happened. But for those people who are like me, who are like, you learn something new and then you're like, oh my gosh, have I done this thing? Am I plagiarizing? I use the gorgeous Bishonen guy in my novel. Or my guy looks like Draco Malfoy but in leather pants. Cough, cough, Cassandra Clare. Because it's a trope now, Draco in leather pants. She started a trope. So like I'm using the Draco in leather pants trope in my story. Did I plagiarize? How can you tell if you plagiarized something for those of us who are paranoid about doing awful things to each other?
Slogans are nice.
Yeah.
If that helps.
Just a sidebar, I'm not going to be able to watch The Flash again without going it up. The actor who did Draco Malfoy is on The Flash now.
Hooray for Tom Felton.
Yeah, go ahead.
So there's actually another Hollywood story that relates to what you're asking about. How do you make sure that you're not plagiarizing someone? Because one of the great one of the funnier moments really during the making of Armageddon was Joe Roth, the head of Touchstone Pictures, over at Disney, had brought in Bruce Joel Rubin, who was one of the writers of Deep Impact, and basically had him just kind of tell him the gist of the story of Deep Impact. And while he's doing that, Joe is going through his notes of Armageddon, and he's making sure that that he didn't in any way unknowingly plagiarize what Bruce had written for Deep Impact. And turns out both of them were released 2 months apart from each other. So yeah, that's one of those things where where 2 different studios were like, hey, we want to do a Meteor movie. Let's make sure that we're not doing
advisors and one didn't.
Well, yeah.
Comment there. Okay. I was turning it over to Dora, but
Okay.
I didn't know if you guys. Oh, you guys have got dovetails. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about how. Oh, go ahead.
Dovetails.
So I'm not sure if that example is quite what I mean, but I have another question now. Can you unintentionally plagiarize? Continue.
Well, my example was intentional plagiarism.
Do go on.
You remember A Bug's Life?
Mm-hmm.
And how
Yeah.
ants came out immediately prior?
Yeah.
That was on purpose.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Hollywood's famous for that.
Because a guy got fired from the Pixar Disney team and went over and said, hey, they're making a bug movie. Let's make a bug movie. And then they did. And A Bug's Life was infinitely better than Ants was, so it was okay.
That was, yeah, Jeffrey Katzenberg, when he was working at Disney, was wanting to put more Edge-style humor into Toy Story. And then he wound up becoming 1/3 of DreamWorks. So, yeah, that's basically what wound up happening.
I'm not sure if this quite addresses the question, though.
It doesn't, no. I just had a story about A Bug's Life.
Yeah.
Because these are cases of these are Hollywood cases of, oh, this is hot right now, we need to do this too. That's jumping on a bandwagon. And like book publishing does this too. Like, oh, vampires are hot right now, let's jump on that bandwagon. Or, oh, YA paranormal romance is selling so well right now, do you have anything that is along that vein? And that's not plagiarism. That's writing to a trend, or that's following a trend.
Sometimes it feels like plagiarism, though.
Plagiarism is more specific. Plagiarism, from what I understand of it, is taking someone else's ideas, but not just the ideas oftentimes. It's more specific than that, like the sequence of ideas, like lifting a plot, or lifting a scene, or lifting a character, and or an entire set of characters, and then just pretending you came up with them and not assigning any credit to the original author, passing the work off as your own. So it's two parts. There's the theft, and then there's the passing it off as your own.
It sounds like you're answering your own question and saying that it's very, very difficult to accidentally plagiarize.
Actually, it isn't, and I can
Do tell.
Okay, there's two ways you can accidentally plagiarize. And in technical nonfiction writing, it actually happens more often. One is you meant to give credit, but accidentally leave off the credit attribution. That happens all the time in honors theses and that type of thing. That's the most common form of accidental plagiarism. Namely, it should have been cited correctly and it wasn't, and it was unintentional. That's number one. Number two, you do a lot of reading. You have an idea, and you forget where it comes from. And there were times that, especially if you are, again, really immersed in a type of literature, you start writing, and you write a whole sentence or a whole paragraph, and it isn't until later, or fortunately, if you look at someone else and your beta reader points this out, it's like, wait a minute, that's exactly like this famous published work that's your favorite book. It's like, how did I do that?
Yeah, it's done subconsciously.
Yeah. That's number two.
I'm going to there's two other people who want to talk. I do want to eventually turn this conversation to how to check your play, check what you've written that you think is original and creative, and make sure you didn't plagiarize by accident. George, you had a dovetail on Fedora.
Go ahead.
Just one quick line. I seriously doubt that J.K. Rowling would had seen the 1986 John Carl Buechler movie Troll. Because if she did, she would have noted that she would have seen that the father's name in that movie is Harry Potter. So,
well, I'm sure she knew quite a few.
I seriously doubt she saw it, but it was a very funny moment to hear that name in the trailer for that very cheap, movie.
I want to talk about how authors can handle it, and first, I want to mention Alex Haley, because he admits to having unintentionally taken passages from the African to his novel, which probably wasn't so, especially since he settled for $650,000. And that's how, of course, many do settle. And then they can't talk about what the settlement was.
Right.
However, Nora Roberts was very famous, or still is, a very famous author of romance novels. Janet Daly, from Branson, by the way, plagiarized one of her novels. And she had written 100, but I guess she was just kind of out of ideas. And it was very obviously plagiarized. And there were offers to settle earlier, but Nora wanted to take it to court because if you don't take a stand, then you get more of the same.
Right.
And there are ways that you can protect yourself, and I have a few listed.
Go ahead.
Well, I don't know that you want to you want to go on with something else first?
In that case, Kathleen, did you?
Oh, so I was going to bring up, I guess, an unintentional plagiarism of my own, even though I was saying it as a joke and didn't think anyone would think it was me. Rumors of my demise have been greatly exaggerated. From V for Vendetta.
That was,
I think it goes
that was
back
a
before
quote
that.
from someone else.
Really?
Yeah.
Where did it come from before?
It's who? It's
Am I misattributing it to Mark Twain?
I
thought
may
it
not be.
was-
Rumors of my death, I think is what is
They've
the
been
original.
greatly exaggerated.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's fine.
So
I'm trying to
basically, they were quoting someone else.
So
Yeah,
you're
that
getting
was a
derivative
quote.
of
It's
Twain.
from Mark Twain.
Okay. I wasn't sure. It was like, no, Twain did it, but I wasn't sure if it was.
We probably
Fred.
all are every time we open our mouths. Twain was like that.
well, that's what the English language is. We
And
just
if we're not
adopt
him,
stuff.
it's probably Shakespeare, because we get a ton of our sayings from Shakespeare.
And Shakespeare borrowed them from Plautus and
Exactly.
Terence and
There's
so on.
nothing new under the sun.
There's nothing new under the sun.
And
Which is
by the
another
way,
phrase.
There's no power in the verse, and this is really shiny. I just plagiarized.
I know of a Nobel Prize winner who plagiarized, but he was proud of it. He said that he took a bunch of crappy stuff, a poem called The Wasteland, and turned it into his own poem called The Wasteland, which was brilliant. So he never apologized at all for that plagiarism.
But
which
I think
actually-
I think he's arguing that that's transformative.
He did.
So that's no longer that's not plagiarism. That's
Oh
inspired.
yeah, I
by.
think it's still plagiarism, but it is still transformative, and he still won a Nobel Prize.
See, I wouldn't think that that's plagiarism involves. First off, it was attributed, and second
It
off,
was attributed.
so that's number one of not being plagiarized, and number two, he transformed it. So number two of not being plagiarized.
Can you talk about transforming a bit more? Because I think
That's
that's
a
important.
fuzzy concept.
Can you define it then?
Basically, changing things enough to make it your own.
Okay.
And trying to prove that in court, it's like anybody's guess what the judge will say.
But I,
So, okay, go
It
ahead.
comes down to intent
And
as to whether or not somebody staring at both pieces would think they were the same.
Right.
and I think the transformative aspect of what Melanie just said is one of the ways you keep from plagiarizing, because as I mentioned earlier when I posed my question about what the difference is between using tropes and having influences and plagiarizing, if you create something, even if you start from an original idea that belonged to someone else, if you transform it into something that is unique and your own, so that it is unrecognizable as that other thing, then you are not plagiarizing. You are being influenced, which is something creative people the world over have been doing since they were people.
To sort of rephrase that point, as I've said in previous episodes, a lot of everything has to do with brand and with money. It's people steal from each other all the time, but the question is that theft costing someone sales? When you use a quote from somebody, like we were doing with Mark Twain, we're not robbing Mark Twain's estate of money by using that, so they're probably not going to sue us for it. But
They probably couldn't sue us for it either. There's an
Yeah,
important
it's a
distinction
different
there.
thing.
the point being is that if there's plagiarism or settling out of court and all of these things, it's all about money. And if you're passing a whole work off as your own, and it's stealing that idea from someone else, that would then it's all about brand identity. You know, if we confuse here's an example. Harry Potter is really popular. It's been super popular for decades now. And it's lots of people try to capitalize on that. And there was a Harry Potter handbook that was actually published, that kind of broke down the characters and the terms and how the rules of the universe worked, and people thought it was an official Harry Potter release.
Right.
That infringed on the brand. That was suable. And it was sued, and it was taken out, and they were forced to stop publishing that book.
That was probably one of JK's billions.
Yeah.
Yeah. Seriously. A
Because she
couple
got
of
big
things on that plagiarism aspect. There are some works that are now out of copyright, but that does not prevent the estates from attempting to sue. One I mentioned is Sherlock Holmes. That's why you see Sherlock and Elementary out there right now, and other things that are been able to be produced. There are Sherlock Holmes characters, Sherlock Holmes stories. It's out.
There are books. There are new
There are
books
new
being
books.
written. New Sherlock Holmes stories.
By people
being
we
written.
actually know.
characters.
Yes.
Yeah, using the actual characters, because the characters are out.
Yeah. They're public domain.
Now, where you fall into it, it's a huge fuzzy, and you know, I'm going to go back to my whipping child. This is why I don't write fanfic, is because you're really falling into a huge fuzzy. I've got you. Okay, is whether or not something is copyrighted, trademarked, and so forth. For example, if I was to write a Sherlock Holmes story that used Sherlock's version, the TV show's version of Sherlock Holmes, I could get in trouble. I'm not sure I would, but I could get in trouble. Because now deriving...
A better way of
off
taking it would be Elementary.
Yeah.
Because they've changed their story enough that if I wanted to create an Elementary style Sherlock and a female Watson and all that kind of stuff, they could come after me.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
yeah.
Yep.
The Doyles can't.
Back up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Define terms. Public domain.
Public domain.
Thank
Public
you.
domain basically means that it is out there in the open and the copyright has expired.
Right.
Or
So
never
there-
existed.
There is, well,
It's
yeah.
old
but
enough.
That would mean it's old enough that, you know,
Right.
It's still expired.
still-
there was no one around to copyright.
Correct.
But yeah, so basically in the public domain, you can use these stories, you can use them for whatever you want. There is no one who can come after you. There is a time limit on every copyright. That time limit keeps getting
longer.
extended
Right.
thanks to Disney. We all live under the giant umbrella of
It's
Disney.
all Mickey Mouse's fault.
It is.
It really
But
is.
it also helps. You can't copyright, you can't take the Iron Chronicles until I think it's 90 some
I
odd
was gonna
years
say,
after
what's
my
the
death.
number? It's not. It's the
It's
life of
70
the author
Is it
plus
70
72
years?
years.
But that can be extended
Thank
by
you.
your
If you're
by
something like Mickey Mouse.
Yeah, they can be extended by your heirs or
by your
estate.
heirs.
Yeah.
They can
Depending
extend
on
that
how-
for
how-
another 20 years, I
Yeah.
believe.
Things are
Which
written.
so it could be your life plus 90.
Yep.
Right.
So, is this why works like Pride and Prejudice and Zombies exist?
Exactly.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
A good example is The Wizard of Oz, works by L. Frank Baum. The works themselves are out of copyright, so they're public domain.
Right.
But the 1930s movie is in copyright. So you can write all the Wizard of Oz stuff you want, but if you make the witch green, because the witch wasn't green in the original work, then you have to make a deal with Universal owns it.
I was saying Universal or MGM, one of the two, but yeah.
Yeah.
MGM brought it out, which means a Warner Brothers owns
Right,
it.
so you have to make a deal with them like Wicked did.
Mm-hmm.
Wicked gets away with it because it's a stage play and it was a book, which was different enough from the movie. But they're having trouble making Wicked into a movie because technically it's violating the film copyright because of that specific bit and the ruby slippers because they weren't ruby in the book. And lots of other elements that they changed for the movie that made it specifically movie as opposed to the actual works, which you're welcome to write Wizard of Oz style novel with characters from the Wizard of Oz as long as you aren't stealing from one of the under copyright filmed adaptations.
And I believe that Warner Brothers made the deal with Disney when they made Oz the Great and Powerful, because that shows the Wicked Witch of the West becoming green.
Yes.
And so has works itself like as a prequel to that eventual
Yeah,
version
Disney
of the
wants the
story.
rights to that so bad.
Oh yeah.
Well, Disney wants rights to everything.
Yes.
Wasn't there? I could be thinking about the wrong thing here. But wasn't there a thing recently with the copyright of the Diary of Anne Frank? With because I think that's coming up on its date soon, if it hasn't already. And the issue that they were coming up against was that I think the proceeds from the book are supposed to be going towards a nonprofit of some sort. And once it's no longer under copyright, they can't do that anymore. Does that sound? I feel like I'm thinking about the wrong thing.
I haven't heard of
I'm not
this,
sure.
but it sounds
Awesome.
interesting. Yeah.
Really quick, I was going to say, yes, we're not closing the show yet, but we're getting close. I do want to throw this out there, I'm just going to keep it short. If you Google plagiarism or checking for plagiarism online or anything like that, you should be able to find some sites that I've never used them, so I can't say which ones are good or not. But you can drop your stuff in there, and we'll check to see if you've plagiarized, even unknowingly. Which, if it's free and it works, yay, because that's cheaper than the other alternative, which is paying the attorney. So, which is another thing too. If you think your works have been plagiarized, it's all up to the attorneys, and you want to find a good intellectual property attorney. And I notice I've used the specialization.
What with all of the electronic possibilities,
Oh yeah.
there are things that you have to do a lot faster than it would ever come to your getting an attorney, I do believe.
I agree too.
And this is some advice from Shiloh Walker, who had lots of problems with people plagiarizing her romances. And here's what she says to do. Get a takedown letter, write a takedown letter, and save it. And send it. She sometimes sent out her takedown letter as much as 10 or 12 times a day.
Wow.
So, get a takedown letter. There are templates for such a thing online that are not hard to find. There is a site like ipwatchdog.com, and various places like eBay have their own things, and you have to write to them to take down the site, whatever it might be.
eBay and YouTube are two examples.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
She says, don't just send a letter to whatever email address you find demanding the works be removed. If certain terminology isn't included, the website doesn't have to comply. And generally they won't. That's the friend that Brad's talking about there.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe if you get the right wording in there and scare him enough, you will. Hit file sharing sites. Use your search function provided on the site, and also Google search to see if you can find stuff, and that's what you were talking about. Hit the major auction sites like eBay and iOffer to search for illegal auctions of your works that don't give you, any money. Keep track of repeat offenders. If you've sent several takedowns that have been listed by a member, then point out that and remind that the terms of the DMCA, whatever that is, require them to take action against repeat offenders. I'm not sure what the DMCA is, but...
Digital something...
Digital Millennium Copyright Act, I think.
Okay.
Thank you.
So you've got some legal help out there, but you have to show that you've done your homework and your spade work. Well, after sending your takedown, consider notifying the IC3, that's the Internet Crime Complaint Center, which is another place, another representative place that you have access to. So you have some legal possibilities out there. Even if you see it today, you can start these steps tomorrow and maybe get it down very soon and not have to resort to other things that you don't want to resort to. But at any rate, tackle it. The first thing you've got to do is tackle it. You've got to do it on your own. Just like everything else with the electronic world, you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and do it.
Jen, you're going to be next. I'm just going to say real quick, anything with legal, any action you end up taking legal, it's called paper chase. You need to have a trail. And you need to be showing that you're actively done something. And that's as far close as I can get to legal advice without going to jail. So go ahead.
I have a plagiarism story, I suppose. It's more of a theft story, but just to prove that not everyone is as big an ass as this guy in Canada. I draw a lot of fan art for fun. It's sort of a warm-up, practice my craft thing. I never sell fan art. If you ever see my fan art for sale somewhere, someone else is doing that. And I found it for sale once on eBay. They were selling one of my fan art pieces for a popular franchise as a poster. And so I popped on, someone I knew sent me a note on Tumblr with a link to it. So I popped on and I said, this is my fan art. Here's the link to my original post of it. You're not allowed to sell it. Please take it down. And he took it down the next day. It's like, so people who
I suppose kudos for drawing so awesomely.
Yeah, seriously.
I suppose.
And for getting it out there, too.
And for taking it down.
Yes.
A+. So, I didn't send them a letterhead or anything. It was just, I have proof that this is mine and you should probably not be selling it.
Yeah.
And I just go on record saying I don't really believe that anyone should be selling fan art unless it's extremely transformative. But even then, I always kind of draw the line on is someone buying this piece because I drew it, or are they buying this piece because it's Sailor Moon?
Right.
And it's like, they're buying it because it's Sailor Moon. So, therefore, some of it at least should have been Sailor Moon's money.
Right.
That's kind of that's why I don't get booths at, like, Comic-Con or whatever. I know Comic-Con is okay, and places are okay with selling fan art as long as you're not selling actual logos and things like that. But that's just my personal take on it. Everyone else can draw their own moral line.
Hot draw. You also now finally have a little protection even on or from Google. Since they settled for, I don't know, they now have to pay $45 million into a settlement fund to pay settlement class members who were hurt by what they did earlier. And there are a lot of other provisions that they have to follow. So now you even get a little protection from a really big boy in the industry like Google.
Well, I will say there's the other end of this. This was a case of it's standard. There's some musician that any time that the work comes up, they send down takedown notices, and YouTube took it down.
Yeah.
Well, this was an attorney teaching a class that was demonstrating fair use. Guess what? He took them. They took it down. He took it all the way to court, and of course he won. That was the whole purpose, to demonstrate how you can use other people's copyright use for fair use.
Good job.
And he got them to change their policies.
The problem with that is that YouTube doesn't have an army of people who are looking for infringement. They have robots who search the data to look for evidence, and they don't care if it's fair use or not because the robot has no conscience or reasoning power.
Yes, but the point is, if he fought back, acting as his own attorney, and actually got money out of it.
I'm glad.
So,
I'm happy to hear that.
I'll be happy for the
And then on Friday, as our
I'm happy
final
for fair
thought-
use.
Actually, I was going to throw out, this has actually become a huge thing on Twitter. People stealing tweets.
What?
No, this is huge. So, and their jokes usually are some sort of funny thing. And because it's dated and everything like that, you can track back and find the original person who posted the thing. And then, people's careers. There's a famous one of two lawyers in Pennsylvania, I think it was. The one lawyer made a comment that was kind of a funny joke about, something having to do with, home law or, family law or something like that. And about 2 months later, this guy posted it as his. Exact same wording, nothing wrong with that. And then everyone just piled onto him, sent him the original tweet. He wouldn't take it down because he was being, kind of a dick about it. But, it ended up becoming this huge thing, and he actually ended up having his career be hurt because now he's known as the plagiarism lawyer.
Yeah.
Like the lawyer who plagiarizes. So, it's a thing. It's a problem. Jokes get stolen all the time. It's a big thing amongst comedians. But we now live in an age where almost anything you create, like memes and stuff, there's a lot of done where somebody creates something, but they're not the person who creates the meme out of it, and the meme's what becomes viral. And the original person who created it gets absolutely nothing.
Yep.
And it's a problem with the way we kind of take anything we want off the web, but it's a thing out there.
So, and on that note, I'm going to actually say that was a great way to end. We're going to say tune in next week for yet another interesting topic on the writing industry. Have a great week writing, and share our posts with your friends.
Did you know that Right Pack Radio has an international audience? How would you like to reach that audience in regards to your books, your book services, your author services, or more? Go to www.windingtrailsmedia.com and look under advertising for more information. If you don't have a script, that's not a problem. We will be happy to work with you. Once again, go to www.windingtrailsmedia.com for more information.
The new theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her.